former FBI Assistant Director James Comey joined Fox News host Neil Cavuto to react to the firing of Director Comey.
I think it came at the right time, and I think it was done correctly, and I'm glad it happened for the morale of the FBI and for the rule of law and for a whole host of other reasons. You know, Jim Comey, at the very beginning, made the huge mistake of dancing with the devil. A criminal referral came over to the FBI, apparently attached to it a note from the Attorney General not to call it a criminal investigation. And then, as we learned later on, a grand jury was never empowered. You cannot conduct a major investigation without a grand jury because you can't compel testimony, you can't serve search warrants, et cetera, Neil. But months later, he has this press conference, which was unprecedented, and he talks about this investigation, which even though it was hollow, in my view, there was enough evidence scattered around Hillary Clinton and her tribe there that, that he put together a pretty effective prosecution memo. By the way, something no one in the FBI ever does unless it's in conjunction with an indictment. And I see a lot of the active duty agents. I've never talked to anybody that was intimately involved in the investigation. I never would. Even if I could, I never would. But I've talked to numerous agents at retirement dinners and different things, we go to from time to time. And they were very, very disappointed because of the reasons I just told you. That the FBI does not do those types of things that Comey did.
Now, I can report, because I have actually filed a letter several years ago that was in direct disagreement with his nomination and confirmation by the United States Senate when President Obama named him as the FBI director. In fact, the Senate voted 99-1 in favor of the confirmation of James Comey as director. The sole vote of opposition came from Kentucky U.S. Senator Dr. Rand Paul. Now, the reason for my and my organization, the Law Enforcement Officers Advocates Council's opposition was due not only to what we had seen others take a position on, but we also addressed the House of Death cover-up and mistreatment of the confidential informant involved. This cover-up, and this is a direct quote from my July 29, 2013 letter, is widely but quietly referred to as one of the darkest chapters in U.S. law enforcement history, and it occurred under Mr. Comey's watch as Deputy Attorney General of the United States. Now, this case started as a home in a Juarez, Mexico neighborhood, became a recurrent slaughterhouse for the Juarez drug cartel in 2003 and 4. And the complacency of the DEA, as well as the then, as it was known, Bureau of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and the Department of Justice led to unnecessary deaths and a massive cover-up. Now, I'm going to spare you a lot of these details, but suffice it to say that there were a number of murders that took place, and the U.S. Attorney under the infamous Johnny Sutton, who headed up the Western District of Texas office of the DOJ, basically mishandled this case. It was a sting that went bad. It exposed the fact that murders were taking place, and the CI, or confidential informant, had informed his handlers at ICE, as well as the assistant U.S. attorney. Instead of informing the Mexican government and pulling their people out, they allowed it to continue. It's only when a DEA special agent in charge and whistleblower, two of his agents nearly getting grabbed by the Juarez drug cartel, which set off alarms, and of course, after being briefed, he confronted the U.S. Attorney Johnny Sutton as well as his ICE counterpart, the special agent in charge Guardioso, and that basically led to not an investigation, a joint investigation task force, you would presume. No, a joint assessment task force was sent out and essentially covered up the case. And then later placed the confidential informant in so-called protective custody, but essentially what they did was they held him for several years, gave him no access to legal representation, and actually tried to deport him to Mexico, where he would have been promptly murdered. So we later found in the records that the deputy general was fully briefed. This took place right after the whistleblower special agent in charge, Sandalio Gonzalez, sent that letter to Sutton, who forwarded it to the Department of Justice, and the cover-up then began. Went all the way up to Deputy General Comey, and Attorney General Ashcroft, as well as to the DHS side. ICE was headed up by then Secretary Michael J. Garcia, as well as Secretary Tom Ridge. So the hierarchy of both departments knew about this, and instead of properly investigating it, notifying the Mexican government, and doing all the right things, instead they covered it up, which what has gone on since has been staggering.